right. Okay, guys, thank you. Am I on there? All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Highland, and I'm an alcoholic. I have had the gift of sobriety, hey, Tina, since April 12th of 1990, and I'm so grateful for that. And it's so grateful to be here this morning. And somebody's going to have to work with Tina on getting a little bit more enthusiastic about her. I'm going to hire her as my agent, I think. Wonderful, but it's great to see the positivity and great to be home. It's great to be with my people this morning. And Emily, I know you've been involved. Thanks for contacting me. And Sid, thanks for stepping up and doing this. And all of you, thanks for being here this morning. You know, I'm sure a lot of other things you could be doing on a Saturday morning instead of coming on the computer and listen to an old drunk like me. But thank God for this, all right, because that's what we do. And I just really needed some brightness this morning. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, you know, unfortunately, things in our country are a little bit shaky at the moment. And not only the, excuse me, the coronavirus, but we've got a little situation going on like a couple other cities with some police and racial discord here, which has unfortunately turned into, you know, a very violent and, awful situation in terms of burning and looting and that type of thing. And, you know, I just thank God Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't operate like the rest of the world for the most part, right? That every time, and we're going to talk about insanity today, but, you know, in many ways we live in an insane world. And, you know, the good news is in Alcoholics Anonymous that we're able to put all that other stuff that causes so much problems in our world, the exclusivity, whether it be color or whether it be gender, that causes so much harm in our society. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we put it all aside, right? And if you're a drunk and you show up here and you want to be part of this deal, then man, that's all that counts. And we don't care how educated you are, how much money you have, what color you are. We're glad you're here. And boy, I love getting to AA just for that fact, if nothing else. And I'll tell you this little story. My home group is called the Lambton Group, and it's in downtown Louisville. I mean, in fact, it's kind of always been down in the hood. It's always been down in the city. And as a direct result of that, I tell you this little story to kick off this thing today, kind of in lieu of kind of what we're looking at now in our city. But as a direct result of where my home group is, probably 60, 70% of the guys I sponsor in AA are African-American. You know, and I don't think a whole lot about it. That's where I grew up in AA, and that's just the way it is. But anyway, about 6, 7 years ago, I was driving down by my home group one day, and a guy hit me in the rear end. And the guy that hit me was an elderly black gentleman and his wife. And, you know, we're standing in the middle of the street waiting for the police to come. But keep in mind now, I'm only about 3 blocks from my home group. About that time, here come 2 guys down the side of the street, and they're both black. They ran over to me. They go, "Tim, are you okay, man? Are you all right?" I go, "Yeah, guys, I'm all right." About that time, 2 other guys came from the other side of the street, both African-American. They ran over to me. "Tim, are you hurt? Can we take you anywhere?" I said, "Oh, guys, I'm all right. Go ahead." About that time, car came off the expressway. 5 guys in there, all black. Stopped the car, came over. They all gave me a hug. Said, "Tim, are you hurt? Can we take you anywhere?" You know, I didn't think anything about it, but I turned around and that elderly black gentleman and his wife who hit me were standing there, and he went, "Who are you anyway?" And, you know, I thought, what can I tell that guy? Man, I'm just a drunk. But, you know, our book says what grows up amongst us is a fellowship that's indescribably wonderful, you know, and it so much is. And I so much appreciate that, especially here this morning when we have so much discord going on in our country today. So anyway, we're going to talk about insanity. And I know a lot about it, or I wouldn't be here. You know, when I first saw the topic, insanity in AA, inside AA, you know, I was a little confused as exactly what direction to go with this thing. But, you know, I know, in fact, you have to be insane to qualify for our group, as you probably see. In the second step, it tells you, you know, that we have to recover from insanity. So I'm saying, because nobody shows up here, you know, just because one day, you know, things are going well, I just put all the money in the bank. driving my Mercedes around, and I thought, well, hey, I'm going to pull over to an AA meeting and see what's going on in there. It doesn't happen that way. You know, we all come in here pretty crazy. So, you know, we know about insanity and Alcoholics Anonymous because we're dealing with a disease of body, mind, and spirit. And in the middle of all of that is something called insanity. And, you know, I guess as I took a look at this, the most frequent definition of insanity that we hear is, you know, doing the same thing, expecting different results. And, you know, man, when I looked at that, you know, it's been part of my problem the whole time that I've been alive. For some reason, you know, I've got this idea, or I have this adversity to doing the whole thing. I have this adversity to following all of the directions. I remember when I was in the 7th grade, here's a good example. I had this English teacher, and she said, you have to do an outline, and then you can write your essay. Well, I didn't like that idea. I thought, you know, that kind of impedes my personal freedom. So what I would do, I would write the essay, and then I'd do the outline afterwards to make it match my essay. And of course, she caught me and she flunked me. But what I'm saying is there's a part of me that just doesn't want to do the whole thing. And what I'm going to drive at is, I think the number one insanity in Alcoholics Anonymous is that we're very clearly told 100% what to do. And yet for some insane reason, a lot of us, including me, decide, no, I'm not going that way. I'm going to maybe do 70%, or I don't know, maybe 80% some days. But, you know, it's the same thing. You know, my kids grew up, and I'd get these toys that you had to put together. And this is no different to this day, you know, and they have directions. Well, I just throw the directions aside and start winging it. You know, of course, you finish putting the thing together, and you got 3 screws left and 4 bolts. And, you know, my wife's saying, why didn't you follow the directions? And I don't know what that is. I think it's a part of the self-centered nature of my disease, is that I just don't want to do it the way other people do it. You know, and I say this for having been in the program for 30 years now. I know in my own story, and also in working with so many other guys, when people relapse in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's very clear to me, it's one primary reason, is that for whatever reason, they chose not to thoroughly follow our path. For some reason, they chose to do a part of what we do, not all of it. You know, and in chapter 5, which we read every day, in the second line, it says, we thoroughly follow our path. I looked up thoroughly in the dictionary. It says rigorously, in depth, exhaustively, from top to bottom. I think it's pretty clear. And then in the next line, it says, we completely give ourselves to this simple program. Completely means having all the parts or elements, lacking nothing, whole, entire. So in the first 2 and 3 lines of how it works, they very clearly say, you have to do all of this. You have to be thorough, and you have to be complete. And somewhere along the line, I completely ignored that, completely, you know, didn't pay attention to that. And for whatever reason, got about the business of thinking, what can I do to stay sober and do maybe, you know, 60 or 70% of all this stuff they're talking about, you know. And that's the attitude I came in with, you know. And so right off the bat, you know, you guys are saying, you know, have a meeting every day. And I'm like, every day? I mean, that's kind of really overdoing it. I mean, a guy like me, if it takes a normal drunk, you know, every day, then I could probably get by with a couple, 3 days a week. And get a sponsor. No, I don't think so. I mean, come on, I got the book, I got the literature. I'm not stupid. I can read this thing, and, you know, I think I can figure it out. And get a home group. Oh, no, you don't understand. I don't mix well with people. You know, I'm going to do the deal, but I don't want to, you know, have to get a part of a group and, for God's sakes, they might make me do something, or they might expect me to be there every week. I mean, I can't do that, and basically what I'm saying to you, I came in and chose the parts of the program, chose the parts of the fellowship that I wanted to do. And nowhere have I seen yet in 30 years in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous does it say, you can choose the parts you want to do, and you'll just be not only sober, you'll be happy, joyous, and free the rest of your life. I just haven't found it yet. And yet, the number one insanity, and I believe not only in my mind, but in a lot of alcoholics, is exactly that, is that I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to do all the parts, And, my thought was, it was just like, when I was back in school, I thought, well, hey, anybody could get an A if you studied every day and read all the literature. It takes some real ingenuity to get an A and only study about 50% of the time and only read half the book. Now, if that's not insane, I don't know what is. But the point is, that's kind of exactly the way I accepted it, came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And here's what I need to tell you. Looking back on not only my early journey in AA, but also my approach to life about trying to figure out how to do things without doing the complete directions. It never did work. It failed me miserably in my personal life and my educational life and everything I've ever done. And yet, there's still a little part of me, and I think this is the part of the self-centered core of my alcoholism, that kind of wants to find a way to do it a little bit different than you guys, and I say that's so insane because every day I watch guys and people in Alcoholics Anonymous who come in and get in fully into Alcoholics Anonymous, and they get into the fellowship and into the service and the unity of the home group, and they actively do those steps and continue to work those steps through their life, and they carry that message to lots of people. And not only do they stay sober, those are the people that I find out are having the most fun in Alcoholics Anonymous. And yet, and here's what I think is the insane thought that comes in to every alcoholic. And I remember coming to AA and I'd get on a roll, right? I'm doing it. I'm getting up. I'm saying my prayers, I'm helping other alcoholics. I'm calling my sponsor. I'm going to meetings, and I'm doing it every day, and it's working, and it's working, and it's working, and it's working. And one day, I ain't doing it. I ain't doing it. That's insanity. That's insanity. And over the 30 years I've been here, there's come different little periods in my sobriety where, although I have all the proof and experience that the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous are working, there's a peculiar mental twist that comes into my mind, and I don't know where it comes from, that says, Tim, no, let's change it up. I don't think you need to go to that many meetings. Surely to God, you're sponsoring too many people. Back off of that so you have more personal time. And it always reminds me that our book tells us that the problem centers in our mind. And boy, oh boy, is that ever true, because that's my mind. I have a mind, and I think that's where my alcoholism, resides, that has the ability, even 30 years sober, to tell me sometimes that, although this has been worked really great for you for 30 years, Tim, I think maybe you better change it up a little bit, And again, I don't know what that is. I just know it's a part of my alcoholism. And thank God, you all said, yeah, it is. And the good news is, Tim, we told you from the beginning, you only have a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of your spiritual condition. And sometimes I forget that. Sometimes I forget, as I've come along in my journey at 5 years, at 10 years, that it is still just a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of my spiritual condition, which is the actions. It's not based on my spiritual condition, thank God, because some days my spiritual condition is not very pretty. But you guys said, no, it's the maintenance that will keep you sober. And the maintenance are the same things that you gave me day one: prayer, sharing, and helping. Prayer, sharing, and helping, and I try to simplify it that way, because, you know, an old timer told me early when I came in, Tim, if any point of the day you're praying, you're sharing with somebody else, or you're helping somebody else, you're probably going to be sober, you know, and as simple as that sounds, that's true in my life. So the bottom line is I know those actions, if I take them on a daily basis, as you guys have suggested in the 12 steps, that they work just fine. And, you know, here's the other part of that I have to always mention, because my sponsor, Don M, always drills this into me, is that, to me, it's always going to be about the actions you take and not your feelings, thoughts, and beliefs. Because if you're new, one of my insane thoughts when I showed up is, not only do I want to be sober, I want to feel good about being sober. I want to understand why I'm sober. And I want to know for sure that it's going to work. And you guys said, no, 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 Tim, you know. Your feelings, thoughts, and beliefs are your disease, son. You know, and if you're going to continue to follow those feelings, thoughts, and beliefs, you're going to have a lot of trouble. All we're going to ask you is that you show up and take those actions every day, whether you feel like doing it, whether you understand it, and even if you don't think it's going to work, if you're still going to take those actions, you're going to be okay. And, you know, I tell you all, that's so important because, honestly, I'm going to shock you if you're new. I've been here for 30 years. And probably half of that time in AA, I felt so good about it. I thought you people were the most wonderful people in the world. And I knew it was going to work for a little guy like me. The other half of the time, I thought, this is the dumbest thing God ever created. All these people are hypocrites, and it's not going to work for a guy like me. But Don likes to point out, he said, no, but Timmy, because you did the same thing, you took the same actions, you stayed sober both ways. And thank God for that, all right? Because I can't always feel and understand and believe it's going to work, but I continue to take those action steps. Anyway, kind of getting back to my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous and relating it to that insane thought that says I can get by with less. You know, and I'll share with you the very first meeting of AA I went to, because I was losing my marriage, and my wife strongly suggested maybe that I go to a meeting, and so I did. I kind of just sat on the outside chair, listened. When the meeting was over, I got up and I picked up the literature, and I thought, hey, I'm good now. I mean, I got the stuff's right here. It tells you what's wrong with you and what to do. And I took the literature home. My wife said, oh, so you went to a meeting? I said, yes, I did. She said, are you going back? I said, well, no, I mean, I don't think I have to go back. I mean, look, I got the literature here. And she said, get out. So that was my first attempt at AA, and that was going to be a number of years before I actually walked in the door on April 12th of 1990. But what I'll share with you, when I showed up, I heard you reading how it works. I saw those steps on the wall. I saw, you know, you guys and working in your home group and taking the service commitments, and I saw all of it. And, you know, I remember sitting there in the early days thinking, well, I don't understand all this, but, you know, I'll figure out, you know, some parts of it that I might need to do that'll keep me sober. And for the first 14 months of my sobriety, I didn't have a home group. I didn't have a sponsor, and I certainly hadn't gotten near a step. And I was about as crazy as you could possibly be. And I was so full of anger. You know, I cussed a guy out in a meeting one day. They threw me out for using profane language at the Token Club one night. I was just a mess, okay? So my solution of kind of picking and choosing what I wanted to do in AA was not working very well. And I got so angry, you know, one day that, you know, I ran into a little guy who eventually became my first sponsor. And he said, when are you going to be ready to do something about your anger? And I said something like, "I'll shut up," you know. And the bottom line was, you know, I didn't know what to do because I was at that point, 14 months drier to bone, that I was either going to take a drink or I was going to blow my brains out or I was going to blow somebody else's brains out. God had taken me to a point of level 14 months without a drink in Alcoholics Anonymous. where I got into enough pain where I became willing, to do something different. And what happened was that old guy sent me down to what became my home group, Lambton, at Lambton Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And you know what? They ended up right away making me the coffee maker. And right away, he also put me into a men's big book group on Wednesday night that meets to this very day in my office. And something happened that day, you all. Something happened. I found out, for one thing, where the fun was in Alcoholics Anonymous. The fun wasn't out there on the edges where I was with 1 foot in and 1 foot out. The fun was flat in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, where people are doing the deal, making the coffee, giving people rides, setting up the chairs. Those people were having a blast. Just like the people on this today, just like Tina and her enthusiasm. People in the middle of AA just are having a blast. And I'll tell you, from that day forward, although I wasn't sure where the middle of AA was some days, I made a vow that I'm never, ever getting out of the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I never want to be on the outside, following the insane thought that maybe, just maybe, I can get by with this without doing all this stuff that the other people do. And you know what? maybe you can. Maybe you can stay dry for many, many years and many, many days. But I didn't want that. I wanted to be happy and joyful again. I wanted to feel free in who I was. And I found the people that achieved that were the people that, for some reason, followed the directions exactly as they were given, and they thoroughly followed the path of the people ahead of them. And they completely did the 12 steps, and they completely got involved in the home group, and especially the service entity of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I say that because there's the whole, there's the old enchilada there. We have a fellowship and we have the program of recovery. And I don't know why this happens, and I think this is an insane thought in AA sometimes. You'll hear a bunch of AAs arguing which is most important, the program of the 12 steps or the fellowship. And the insanity of that argument is one can't really make it without the other. My sponsor, Don, says, you could throw them in a closet with a big book and say, get well. Ain't going to happen. The magic of Alcoholics Anonymous happened when they took these 12 spiritual principles, which have been around for a long time, by the way, and two drunks got eyeball to eyeball with each other. Then the magic happened. So the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous is the fellowship and the spiritual program of recovery. And that's what makes it different. So to choose one or the other and not participate on one side, not the other, is absolute insanity. And yet, to some extent, for different periods within my sobriety over the last 30 years, that's exactly what I did. I'll share with you kind of my journey after I got back into the program there. And again, I still have this idea, this insane idea that maybe I can shortcut somewhere along the line here and not have to spend the time. Like my sponsor, he's insane. Gosh, he's got guys coming in his office. He's got guys, coming after work. Whew, man, this guy is really, he's really invested in this thing. So I did the first 3 steps, and I think this happens to a lot of us. I did the first 3 steps and jumped to 12 and tried to start helping you. So I had a 3 and a 3rd step program going there for a while. And I loved helping other people. I was out there 12 stomping right off the bat. I was dragging guys in from everywhere, just 12 stomping my life away. But my life is miserable. 5 years sober, my life is crashing down. I lose my marriage, that I had gotten back when I got sober. One of the guys I sponsored killed himself. My mom died. It was just one of those times where I'm asking myself, what's this all about? I'm helping all these guys. I'm 12 stomping them to death, and I'm miserable. just miserable. So I was driven to my knees in a way at 5 years sober. And of course, the answer is going to be is, yeah, Tim, you're miserable because you failed to understand that there's 12 steps for a reason. If they only wanted you to do 3 1/3, then that's the way it would have been, son. But they said, you are such that with the mental obsession and the spiritual malady deep down inside you, you're not going to last very long if you don't work the rest of those steps. On honesty, I did my 4th and 5th step to the best that I could do. And I learned a valuable lesson, as I looked at 6 and 7. I thought somewhere along the line that 6 and 7 said that I was supposed to get rid of my character defects. So I was working, trying to get rid of the defects that I thought were screwing up my life. And the harder I tried to do that, worse things seemed to get. My work was collapsing. I was about to go bankrupt. As I told you, I lost my marriage. But I'm 12 stomping. I'm dragging guys into the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. So one day, my sponsor said to me, Tim, here's what I want you to do. Write down on a piece of paper everything that you're doing in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I thought, okay, I will. He's going to be impressed with this, I'll tell you. So I get this piece of paper and I write down, I'm sponsoring 25 guys. I go to a meeting every day. I have a meeting in my office. I have a meeting in my home. It is impressive. I'm thinking, man, he is really going to think this is something. So he looks at the list and looks up at me in disgust and goes, what's this all about? I said, what do you mean it's all about? I'm doing what you told me to do. I'm helping drunks. And he looked at me and it was a changing moment in my life. He said, Timmy, do you think that AA is about getting points? Do you think you're accumulating points with every drunk that you help, with every meeting that you go to? And I just started crying. Tears got in my eyes. And he looked at me and said, Tim, I got news for you. See that drunk out there on the street with the brown bag? God loves him just as much as he loves you. God loves you just the way you are. We don't earn God's love in Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything we do is for fun and for free. And yet, I brought the insane thought in that I brought from the outside world, that if I worked harder, sponsored more guys, went to more meetings, did all the good stuff in the world, that God would love me more. And from that point forward, I understand also that I had no ability to get rid of my character defects any more than I had the ability to stop drinking. And I turned and surrendered those to the God of my understanding. And there started to be a new freedom and, and a new happiness in my life. And, I continued to work the 4 and 5. I got into 8 and 9, continued to, clean up the mess of the past, which for example, I owed $250,000 to people when I got sober, and they kind of really wanted it back. And it took me almost 12 years of my sobriety to pay those people back. But I got diligent about following up on all the amends that I had set up on 8 and 9. But as the book reminded me, that I have this daily reprieve based on the maintenance of the spiritual condition. And somewhere along the line, I got stuck again. And after I lost that marriage at 5 years sober, which was really devastating to me, then, I kept helping drunks, kept 12 stomping. And you guys told me that's good, because our book tells us, when all else fails, keeping a drunk in front of you is always going to be a good thing. But I got impatient, I got nervous, and I decided I needed to find a partner, a spiritual partner to walk this journey with me. And if you're in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's always a dangerous thought that shows up, And here's what I want to share with you. My sponsor is such a wonderful man, and, he it always works when I talk to him first. And usually I always discuss everything and every decision in my life. 9 years sober, I'm thinking, I'm I can choose my own girlfriend, for God's sakes. I mean, and I don't have to call him and ask him about this. So I didn't. And so before he even knew that I was dating this young lady, we were engaged. And after it imploded at 8 years, we got married and it lasted 8 months. He said to me, Tim, is there any reason that you didn't mention this to me before you got engaged? And what I'm saying is, once again, the insanity of I'm going to get outside the rules. Although this works for me really well, on this particular item, I'm not doing it. And I have to tell you, as I look back over my 30 years, almost every time I've deviated and tried to go outside what you have taught me to do, there's always consequences, and they've never been very good. And as I said, that was 10 years sober, and here I was driven to my knees once again, because what I realized at that time, there were 3 more steps at the end of this, 10, 11, and 12, which I kind of, of course, I told you I was doing a third of the 12 step. I mean, I was helping people. But this whole idea about keeping a daily inventory, and certainly this whole idea about prayer and meditation was overstated. I don't, I just didn't think for some reason that was that important. And my sponsor said, Tim, if they weren't important, they would not be part of the 12 steps. Bill would have ended it at 9 once you finished with your amends. The reason we have 10, 11, and 12 is that you have a disease that's going to come back on you and sneak back up on you no matter how long you've been around here. Didn't you understand when they said you only have a daily reprieve based on the maintenance? Well, the maintenance are 10, 11, and 12. Because in 10, you get a refresher course. You're going to get to look at the first 9 steps you did in a different way. You're going to get to look at your behavior. You're going to get to look at your feelings. And you're going to be able to get more insight and effectiveness, as the 10 steps says, and ask God's help so you do not make the same mistakes you made again. You have to keep the slate clean. And 10, 11, which a lot of us, don't spend a lot of time on, is going to be really important to you. Because as we seek to find more peace and comfort and joy within ourselves, that relationship we built with our higher power, that relationship we built with God, has got to continue to grow. It has got to continue to become more bountiful for you. The same level of spiritual connectedness you had at 5 years sober probably is not going to be good enough at 10 and 12 and 20. And the same level that you felt, at 25 years probably is going to slip a little bit by the time you're 30 years sober. And boy, has ever been the truth. And, and what Wilson knew, I guess, is that we have to learn to go inside. Although we, are taught the physical actions of service in Alcoholics Anonymous, this whole idea of connecting with my God on a daily basis was kind of a new concept for me. And, I also would tell you that I thought the 11 steps said prayer. And no, he said, no, it says prayer and meditation. And I thought, oh, no, I mean, not meditation. That's for like the Buddha guys and stuff like that. That ain't me. And what I didn't learn, and I'm almost 25 years sober, and a sponsee of mine, of all things, don't you hate it when they, come up with something you should be doing? And he really got into the 11th step. He really got into meditation. And he got me involved in what meditation really is. And it's simply giving God a chance to talk to you. It's quieting yourself down enough every day, instead of talking at God, is to let God talk to you. And I have to tell you, that has become such a major part of my day, every day today. I often think, Tim, I wish you'd have got started on this a long time ago. It probably would have saved you a lot of pain and angst that you've suffered during your 30 years of sobriety. But what I also know is that we all come to the enlightenment of what a step is all about when we come to it. And for me, it took what it took. It took some broken marriages. It took some real harmful things. Otherwise, my life fully helped me understand that my insane thought that I could get by with this and get everything from this, that anybody could, but I don't have to do all of the steps, that I don't have to participate in the fellowship. That insane thought has been something that I've had to ask God's help with, almost the whole 30 years that I've been here. The good news is that all along that journey, one time I spoke out in Los Angeles, and a lady came up to me and she said, well, Tim, it sounded like you came to a lot of periods in your life there during your sobriety. And I thought, yeah, I thought so too. I thought it was over at 5 years. I thought my life was over at 10 years again. And she said something that I never forgot. She said, Tim, listen, God doesn't use periods. He only uses commas. And I say that because if you're today, you're out there and you think you're at a period in your life, you think life as you would like to see it is over, there's not a period there. There's a comma. The problem is God doesn't share with us, what's behind the comma. We have to suit up and show up each day and do the simple things 100% that you ask us in the first place. Get to your meetings, be available to people, work actively of carrying the 12 steps to other people. Share your own experience, strength, and hope so that they continue to have hope that although what they're going through in their life, they certainly can come out the other side. And, that's what we do. When we think about the insanity of Alcoholics Anonymous, I always think about a story that I heard Joe McQueenie talk about. Joe was the guy, if some of you, most of you probably know, that did the Joe and Charlie tapes. And Joe was at a hotel one time where they were having a big AA conference, and he happened to be walking down the hall that night, and he was behind two women who were not with the AA group, and he overheard their conversation. And one lady said to the other lady, well, what are they doing there anyway? And the other lady said, oh, it's awful. She said, I peeked in there last night. One of them gets up there and talks about all these awful things that happened to him, and the rest of them laugh at him. And I have to think sometimes, if a normal person would peek into our meetings and listen to our stories, they would think, oh my God, these people are truly, truly insane. But what we know and what I found in AA is that it's just the opposite. We work through our insanity by sharing our insanity with each other. One of my favorite spiritual gurus talks about that in AA, God enters through the wound. He enters through the wound, and it's so true. We have spiritual growth, but we usually only have it as a direct result of confusion, anxiety, and pain. And I remember one time along my journey, I was in that condition. I said to my sponsor, isn't there a better way to grow spiritually? Do you always have to go through pain and anxiety? And he goes, well, there might be, Tim, but for guys like you and me, it usually only comes after we fall on our nose. We get up and we ask God, God, please, help, guide me, lead me, help me clean up my mess and keep, stumbling up the hill. And, that's been my journey the last 30 years. I've stumbled up the hill of Alcoholics Anonymous, up the hill of life. And if that's insane, I'm glad that I'm in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, And I just need you guys to remind me when I have the insane thought that maybe I'm 30 years sober now. Maybe I don't have to sponsor so many of these little pukes anymore. And maybe I don't need that big book and group in my office anymore. That's kind of a burden every Wednesday night. And maybe, I don't need to call that sponsor. I mean, he always tells me this, same thing. I know what he's going to say. And that is the insanity in Alcoholics Anonymous that I never want to forget that's there, because I am prone to that happening to me at any given time. And that's why I come to meetings, because you guys can always hear and see the peculiar mental twist in me when I can never see it in myself, right? And what I mean is, I sponsor a guy and he starts saying, hey, Tim, you know what? Hey, listen, that meeting I used to go to on Sunday, I'm going back to church, and that's a good thing, right? Oh, yeah. And by the way, I can't do the Monday night meeting because I'm coaching my son in the Little League. And that's a good thing, right? Oh yeah. And I can't make the Wednesday meeting either because I joined the PTA. Hey, that's a good thing too. And what I'm listening to is the peculiar mental twist that precedes the first drink. And the problem is, I can see it in that guy, but he cannot see it in himself, because what's happening, he's cutting all the lifelines that brought him into Alcoholics Anonymous and kept him sober. So I need you guys. We need each other, because without that, the insane disease of alcoholism is going to get the upper hand almost every time. So listen, I don't want to babble on. I think that's all I have to say on the insanity of AA. I appreciate you all having me here this morning, and hopefully we can all stay on this journey, stay on the road, and remember that it's 100% of what they ask in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, 50% is not going to keep us 50% sober. That's an insane thought. And today I know that, and I appreciate you all letting me talk about it. Thanks. I'm Tim, and I'm an alcoholic.